Hello, and welcome to another episode of Save Your Sanity live stream. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, and this is an adjunct to my podcast, Save Your Sanity Help for Toxic Relationships. And you can see the podcast going by on your screen below, SaveYourSanityPodcast.com. So come on over, listen to over 150 episodes, and learn a little bit more about all those things that are happening that make you wonder, make your head shake, and are crazy making. So today I've invited my friend and colleague, Dr. Gary Salyer, to come along again. We've had great talks before on the podcast and on Facebook. And we're going to talk about the whole idea of how do I ever feel safe in the world again after I've been in a toxic relationship or an emotionally abusive relationship, particularly? Because you start to second guess yourself while you're in it, and then you get out and can I trust myself? Can I not trust myself? Do I see things? Do I not see them? Do I see them as they are? How does this work? So welcome to the show, Gary.
Thank you, Roberta. I'm happy to be here. Here we are, Facebook
Ye-
land.
Yes, I'm delighted that you're here. And there's Gary's website, so you could go and find him too, GarySalyer.com. You can see in his background, he's got that lovely piece of art on his wall. That's the cover of his book, Safe to Love Again. You want to go to GarySalyer.com and find that. So, Gary, this whole thing about, okay, I finally dodged the bullet. I finally got out of the toxic relationship. I saw it was toxic. I realized that I couldn't fix it. I couldn't change it. And now I'm looking at the world saying, can I trust that person? Is that person safe? I may not even be dating. I may just be really leery of humans. What would you say to that question?
Well, I think at first, that's an experience we've all had. Okay. I can still remember being in a relationship many, many decades ago in which, uh, unbeknownst to me, a very serious relationship, I find out that there's somebody else there. And she literally broke up with me on Christmas Eve
Oh,
when I didn't know it. And I hear the guy saying, "Come on, honey, let's go," something with an F word. And I was floored. I was, how did this happen? you know, and afterwards, it's natural to think, well, what clues did I miss? This is on me. And it's like the bullet ricochets and goes inside of us. The mistrust is what it's like. Uh, and I think that's the positive side. It's a call to look at your life, right? But we also got to realize that the key is to realize that not all people are like that. Not all everybody, not all men. And if we generalize too much, all men, all women, and that part of our brain we both know about, it's your reptile brain survival. One time becomes a tradition. As a child, one piece of abuse becomes everyone, and it wants to generalize. One time learning is not, but we're multifaceted as human. It's one time learning was never meant to be our reality, and we've got to start there, I think.
yeah. I think that when we have an emotional experience, when something really touches us deeply, like I often say, for the first 5 to 7 years of our life in brain development, basically we're just a sack of emotional nerve endings looking for
Yes,
meaning.
yes,
And we don't often go back and examine what got put in that sack until something goes quite sideways a little later in life.
yeah.
And this is really one of those moments when it's worthwhile going back and say, all right, now I'm beating myself up, or I'm feeling like a failure, or I'm completely at loose ends. I don't know which way to look or who to trust or whatever. Where in my background did I lose my footing and go to places where I thought other people knew better than I did? Because now you have to start saying, I know me. I know what my boundaries are. I know what my values are. We're putting that all back together after a toxic relationship. And that construction project includes looking at where did I get some of the notions I've been operating from earlier in my life.
Oh yeah, I mean, we do have to do that. Look, we have to ask what set my brain up, so to speak. What set me up to think that this was the only experience I have, and I like to think that what happens early on, our brain learns to survive certain experiences, and then it uses those, and it's like it's looking for survival, and it uses breathing as its criteria. So if you breathe through being really, really well loved and protected and welcomed and cherished and empowered, it says, oh, let's have more of that. The quirk in the program is this part of our brain that's 350 million years old, is that if you breathe through unwelcomed or abuse or disempowerment, unworthy, it says, oh, I breathe through that, because that part of your brain is like your guardian angel. It's looking over your safety, but it's got like an IQ of 10, you know. And
Yeah.
this part of your brain is just it's needing an update, and what it's looking for is survivability, not happiness. This part thinks I want to be happy. That part says I just want to breathe. And we do have to, it's a bug in the system, and it drives us to find people that will replicate our old states that we
Mhm.
survived as a kid. It's not so much surviving mom and dad as it is, it's just a survivable state, but that part of your brain can be worked with. And we just
Yeah.
have to realize that part of our brain is seeking safety. It's not trying to do you wrong. How we get it to look for a better form of safety, that's it. If we can do that, then we can learn to trust ourselves again. It's deep work, but it can be adjusted.
Yes, and I think the analogy that you're alluding to is one that we can really use, which is we had a lot of malware and viruses and worms and Trojan horses installed in us when we were young, some
Yes.
more than others. And they may be sitting around and they don't get triggered for a while. But then something happens and you go, whoa, where did that come from? And so, really, it is cleaning our hard drives and defragmenting what has happened to us and getting rid of the viruses and the malware and whatever it is that leads us to say, I'd like to clean that up, is something that gets us on a path to a healthier way of living, which we can be grateful for. Because, as you say, the reptilian or that very primal brainstem is just in fight or flight or faint or freeze. Like,
Yeah.
okay, something awful's happening here. Alert, 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 alert. And we can stay in that place when we're with a toxic person, or in my terminology, a hijackal. We can stay in that high alert and be just emotionally exhausted. And
Yes.
so we have then to get ourselves back to feeling like we're not exhausted, and then start looking, what shifts do I want to make so I'll never repeat that experience. So what's one of the things that you think is a good start for learning to trust our ability to choose a worthwhile person in life? It doesn't have to be a lover, it could just be a friend, it could be anybody. Like, how do you calibrate that?
Well, I think the first place to start is, to not make yourself wrong. It's one thing to take responsibility to create something different, but if your focus is just on the past, what went wrong, and I'm guilty, and there's something wrong with me, I don't think that helps us. The key is to, what will it take for me to create a different reality, to feel empowered and to feel worthy? I think the worst part of when you've gone through any sort of abusive relationship is, or emotional abuse, is you begin to feel unworthy.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start feeling all sorts of beliefs like, oh, there's something wrong with me, or I'm not enough, or I'll never be right. And even if there's been a pattern, you know, uh, the key point is to ask yourself the question, okay, so not so much why did I create it, but how did my brain delete or not notice or get attracted to that, and to notice how you're creating an experience that helped create this pattern, and then to say, I am worthy of more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask the how question, how can I make it different, that's way better than why, and then you get into guilt. or, I'm screwed up, or
Yeah.
giving yourself a label, right? Oh, I'm codependent. Well, that doesn't tell you how to have better. So I think it's taking responsibility, but not taking blame, and realizing you were born deserving. You were born enough and you deserve to have a better relationship. It's just a matter of figuring, okay, what was I given, like we said earlier, and how do I adjust that? Because you deserve to have it. And that means putting your focus on what you want versus what you didn't want from the past. Too much looking in the
Yeah.
past is deadly. You look at the past so you can look at the future with new eyes. Is
Yeah, exactly. And, there's that analogy like there's a much larger windscreen than there is a rearview mirror on your car. That's
Yes,
so that you can see where you are and where you're going with occasional glances in the rearview mirror. Now, in the therapeutic process, we may spend some time looking in the rearview mirror so that we can find out what led us to being here right now. But
yes,
these are important things to do. So, to the point of not blaming ourselves, let's also add not shaming ourselves, because that piece, like, I should have known better. What's wrong with me that I chose this person? Why didn't I see these? Well, you didn't have the background in order to see it differently. So you experience it and then you can learn something. Then you can say, all right, I see areas where I could do things differently, where I was on autopilot from my past. I walked right into it. I was raised by two hijackals. No matter what happened, I walked right into a marriage with a hijackal. And believe me, I didn't want to. I'd broken up with him. I sent him packing. But what did he do in total hijackal fashion? He went around and met with my parents, met with my godparents, said, "What's wrong with her? I love her so much. Why is she rejecting me?" Talk some sense into her, right? And so I ended up marrying this person because there were just too many adults at that time who needed to be pleased, and I caved. But the thing is, it only lasted 3 years before I said, "No, I'm out of here."
I'm out of here.
But
Yes,
it's important for us to give ourselves a break, be gentle with ourselves, because when you're on autopilot, things do go sideways. And if something calls us to attention, causes us to consciousness, causes us to say, oh, is this something I could do differently or do something about? That's a good thing.
yeah. It is. And, the one thing is, whatever you survived way back then with hijackals, I had a hijackal. She was just borderline, right? Your brain took the best deal available. I mean, I'm amazed at the strength that little kid in me had back then. Yes, he learned some dysfunctional things that resulted in a divorce, 20 years later. But if you're out there and you're listening, just realize that there's no part of you broken. It took the best deal available. But
Yeah.
you actually were born for more rights than you were given. And these are rights you're born with. You can reclaim a right. Whatever was missing in that toxic relationship, whether you weren't given a right to create your own experience, or you weren't given a right to reach out for your needs, or you had no right to belong and have backup and support, or just to love and be loved right back. You can reclaim all those original rights that we're born with. You were born with a brain that expected to be loved and to be loved well. And then but if it wasn't, it's smart enough to make adjustments. But the problem is sometimes it doesn't know there's an expiration date for some of those old safety protocols. Our job is to give that part of your brain a better deal, give it a safety, reset, so to speak, and to really work hard at becoming the most loving person we can, and to have the proper filters to know we'll be loved right back. Because if we opt to be jaded, or we get too defensive, then what happens is the person that could love us in the future, we defend against. And if we defend against them, then we're losing out, and they're losing out on the soulmate they're seeking too. So that's why I think it's important for our generation to work through a lot of this pain. And let's just admit that back there 30 to 40, 50 years ago, they didn't know what we know about transformation. They didn't have the brain science, the neuroscience, the attachment theory, and we have so many more tools available than we even had in our 20s growing up. And so just know that the resources are there. You just have to reach out.
Yes, and our I've given so many talks with this title over the years, Gary, but it still is so true to me. Your past is not your potential.
No, it's not.
And when you really grasp the meaning of that, that whatever happened back there, whomever was in there, that does not define who you decide to be going forward. And maybe you do it in small increments. Most people don't have a road to Damascus kind of experience. Maybe
Yeah.
you have small increments where, yeah, that, I'll change that. Oh, there's something else I can change. But it is really important for us to understand that we can be growing and evolving in a positive direction, even if we have been spending a lot of time with toxic people and we've been withdrawing and restraining ourselves, containing ourselves. We can come to equilibrium with that, to know when to move and when to move away. And these things are things that we need to talk through as well as feel our way through as we do that. Now we have a question that's about toxic people here. So let's just put this up here. Will a child therapist make the NDP father feel she could be manipulated so the MPD father feels happy to send the child to this professional? Okay, this person was on my last call, so she was really hoping to take the child to a therapist because the child is suffering greatly because of the father.
Mhm.
And the father is putting his foot down and saying, no. So my response to her on the last call was the whole idea of shared legal custody comes into play here, and it makes a problem for choosing someone. So this is why her question. What do you say, Gary?
Wow. Well, narcissistic personality disorder. The last thing they're going to want is to be outed, the child to out them by a therapist. On in this one, I mean, there's a part of me that says, find a way to sneak. If the child really needs help, and then I don't know what the legal situation is exactly, but I would accent, because the worst thing for a narcissist is to feel I'm going to be outed. You have to make sure that for the narcissist, that what stays in Vegas stays in Vegas. What goes on? So what goes on in that room will not go outside if you can. And and for them, I would make sure they at least meet the therapist and to assure them that this is not going to be out. This is not outing anybody. It's just helping the son. It's not about him. Even if it isn't, I would try to take the route of assuring the narcissist, whose worst nightmare is someone will reveal my dark side.
There you go. There's
You know,
what said after that.
yes,
The fear of
yes.
a smart therapist.
Yes,
uh,
finding out they hit. Oh yes, and there, I mean, it's there's a lot of research. They don't want them to go into therapy, but if that's the only one, unless you can go to court or do it behind his back,
you
you know,
can't.
you
You,
can't. If you
you,
can't
you,
do
you
that,
can't.
then maybe you go back to court and you explain it to a judge.
Yeah, that's the important piece, is to be able to say, my child, don't link it to the other parent. My child is exhibiting these behaviors that cause me concern. I'd like to get the child help. And you go from that point of view. You don't walk in and say, not that anyone would, but you don't walk in and say to the court, that guy over there is ruining my child. He's damaging him for life or her for life, and I need the child to go to therapy to overcome the father. No, but you can go and say, my child is exhibiting these things. It's happening in school. It's happening in daycare. There's
Yes,
having these outbursts. These things are happening. The child really needs help so that we give the child what's in the child's best interest, and that is the law of the family court, is what's in the child's best interest. So I think that's an important thing to do, because here we are talking about a child who is in the formative stage that we are talking about earlier on this show. Is all right, the groundwork is being laid here by the modeling that the child is getting.
And the older the child, the more the court will listen to their voice. So especially they get 7, 8, or 9, 10, if they're in that age. Much younger, I'm not sure how a court will, but they are, if you can, and if if the therapist can do a run up and show what this behavioral problems are, and this is in the child's best interest for future school success, I think most judges would listen. But I suggested the first thing, because attorneys are $600 an hour, you could at least give it a try to see if you give him a sense of safety. If not, then you probably have to go more of a legal route.
Yes, and you actually, if unless you have 100% legal custody, decisions about health and spirituality and education and anything medical have to be shared, and that's where the problem comes in. So maybe if the child goes to school and the school notices a problem, of course with COVID that's a bit different situation, but then sometimes you can get the child referred to the school nurse or the school psychologist, and then have that recommendation that the child seek therapy, and then it's coming from a third party and not you, and that
Yeah.
can be very helpful too.
Yes.
So let's go back now and talk about rebuilding a sense of trust within ourselves. What are some steps that you found effective for someone to rebuild trust in their own ability to see life clearly?
Well, I think, I talk about it generally speaking, but, every relationship we have I think, is a soul lesson, right? I mean, if we go back and we really, with gentle love for ourselves, learn some lessons, then we can see these people as lesson partners. So, and and if we can learn the lessons, then we can set an intention to stop pulling in lesson partners, but life partners. I think that's when we learn to trust each other. We've got to do some soul searching, because some part did see exactly what the deal is. Whenever I've worked with couples, they always knew what they were getting involved with. Some part, maybe not all of it, but some part did see some of the clues, and it's. I think the best way to start trusting yourself is to really do, look for the clues. And then what feelings inside of me were guiding me. And the heart and soul, my own work is to make sure you're feeling, if you feel welcomed, and you have a right to feel welcomed, and you have a right to feel worthy, and you have a right to be a part of a we, and you have a right to have a voice and feel empowered. If you can restore that, so those are driving your choices, and you've learned some of those lessons and kind of analyze, okay, that's what I missed there and there, you'll pick better. You've got to allow yourself the grace to learn some lessons, and
Mm-hmm.
to find out what feelings were driving you, and then to do the work to realize you deserve to feel worthy. You deserve to feel empowered. Maybe it was the feel of, oh, I can't have any better. Is that not worthy or not empowered? Then how do you feel empowered? Once you feel empowered and worthy people don't choose takers. Empowered people don't choose dominators. Those
Mm-hmm.
people won't choose a hijackal. So it's giving yourself these reference feelings I talk about that gives you a more secure style, and then your brain will start picking. Oh, once you feel worthy, it's looking for worthy, not unworthy. Once you
Yeah,
feel empowered, it's looking for empowered. That's what you need to do. Work on that deep feeling level, and yes, learn some lessons.
yeah. And another way to think about that is, do you give yourself permission? Do you absolutely give yourself permission to take up space and draw breath on this earth? Do you really inhabit your space, your
Yes.
body, your life, your rights, as Gary's saying? But, underneath the rights that he's talking about is that I deserve to be here, to exist. And when you move on to welcomed by joy, as you say in your book, Gary, and I quote you so often, how many people can honestly look back and say, I felt welcomed by joy. That's a great start to life, you
It
know?
is.
But for many people that we see, they were like, oh, well, my parents didn't mean to have me, or I was the afterthought, or somebody got pregnant, or they told me all the time that, I brought you in, I can take you out, you're that meaningless to me. And so we internalize that and we get to places where we don't really think that we deserve to take up space and draw breath, just that. So we have to
Yes.
work on that to be. I used to have, back in the days of Polaroids, I would have my clients have a Polaroid picture taken of them, and then after it developed, I'd have in nature, and then I'd have them erase themselves, and see that there was nothing behind them. There was no background. They were integral to the picture.
Yeah,
And so you deserve to take up space and draw breath.
exactly.
There's a hole where you were. And sometimes we don't have that deep understanding, that deep feeling. And so when you're adding these rights, and I want to talk about them a little more, when we're adding those rights, we have to come from a place that says, okay, I can actually let my shoulders down from my earlobes and say, I can plant my feet firmly on the ground and take up this space. This is my space. I don't have to be apologetic for breathing.
Exactly. Yeah, I call that a right to exist. I mean, when I was born, I tell this story a lot. I mean, my mother was so looking for a girl that she was extremely disappointed to have a boy. I was dressed in pink for the first 6 months, right?
Mm,
And she refused to name me for 3 weeks. That's not exactly welcome with joy. And it wasn't until the state of Ohio has sent some state troopers and she just said, you've got to name him. That's the law. And she still refused. And then they said, well, you can either name him or we'll take you someplace where you'll have a lot of time to think about a name. And so my Aunt Evelyn suggested her two favorite actors, Gary Cooper and Dean Martin. There we have it. You know, now that feeling of unwelcome traveled with me. It's way better to be in my room by myself when I'm 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In junior high, it's like, oh my God, I'm the nerd in the school. I mean, it just changed forms. But either, if I walk in here, I'm not Joe Cole, all these things. Or and in college, it's like, well, I guess I just only fit in when I'm intellectual. That feeling of welcome morphed as I got more complex, but it was the same
right.
feeling all the way along. And when I realized that, did the deep work and realized he was just a little boy who came in the world to love his mother, but she didn't have the capacity and she really lost a beautiful thing. I have a right to be here. The world was meant to be my oyster. I have a and when I realized I could be welcomed with joy, the more and more I invited in, suddenly you realize how you stop filtering for ways I'm rejected, and I began to realize I had more friends that really liked being with me. And I began to realize that, and as I felt more and more welcome, I was more welcoming and more people gave it back. And
Right.
and it grew from a little tiny seed, just planting the seed. Yes, I deserve to be welcome. And more and more and more. These days, I have a bunch of people that if I call, oh, how are you doing? Welcome with joy is everywhere. But it starts by planting the seed in your life. You have a right to be here, plant your life right here on this sphere. You get a right to be in your body, to have the world to be your cozy oyster. And you have a right for someone to wake up in the morning and say, good morning, gorgeous, or good morning, handsome, or to walk in the door and go, God, you're a sight for sore eyes. Come over here. And the more we invite that feeling, the more it attracts. And suddenly you go, oh my God, it's true. I do have a right. People love being with me.
Yeah.
And you let it grow naturally. It's like a little tiny plant in the garden. You plant it and then you first see the little doo-doo-doots coming out. And then it does. It plants itself right where life is.
Yeah. Well, you can obviously see that I relate to your birth story.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be Robert. We're born in the wrong families.
Just put an A on the end of it.
But I'm an only child, and I was told at least weekly that my mother never wanted children. She was happy to tell me that. And I used to say to her, because I think I must have been an old small a soul in a small body, because I would say to her, well, then why do you have me? Like, what are you going to do about it? You never wanted them, but you did what it took to have a baby. So why do you have me?
Yes.
Um, but certainly that was never a welcome by joy situation. And for those listening that are thinking about toxic relationships with these wonderful people I call hijackals, hijackals mainly, to my point of view, after doing this work for so long, they have children for three reasons. One, to get someone to agree with them.
Yes.
Two, to get someone to serve their purposes. And three, to get someone to make them look good
Yes.
and validate their experience. So, those are really poor reasons for having children. And so, of course, you will be warped by being with one of them as a parent because, like you said, this is their first experience doing family. We're born into this. Oh, is this the way it goes? Like, you got to walk on eggshells. They like me when I do this. They don't like me when I do that. But everybody else likes me when I do that, but not here at home. Now this all gets very confusing, and so it gets very difficult. And so it's really important for us to look at this thing of right from the beginning. Do we feel welcome? And now to look, where do we feel welcome? Because if you've been with a hijackal for very long, they have discounted you, dismissed you, demeaned you, degraded you, discarded you. They have done everything to diss you. And you begin to believe the press that they've given you. So after you're out of a relationship like that, whether it's with a parent or a sibling or a partner, your task is to refine yourself and rebuild that sense that, yeah, you do deserve to take up space. Let's move on from the right to exist. What's the next one, Gary?
The next one is the right to have your needs met, where you feel worthy and deserving. And you were born worthy. You don't have to say, how much do I have to earn? How much do I have to change? You were born worthy, and you have a right to reach out for your needs and to expect an attuned and timely response back that someone's tracking. And more than that, that not only do you have a right to ask, but they're tracking your needs. They know you don't like sushi. They don't keep inviting you to go to sushi when you know that, they don't like it. They're looking for your patterns and your preferences. They're stepping into your mind to see what you need. That's what you were born for. You were born for someone to reach back so you can pull it in and receive. And then love is a beautiful give and take where you give and then they take it in and they give you back just a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then you take that in and you give them back just a little bit more. That's how love circles up. It's not meant to be this give thing. And
Yeah.
yes,
Let me throw something in there because you notice we just got that comment that I'm
yes,
sorry that you've had that experience of not being welcomed by joy, because
yes.
Gary and I certainly do understand it and we know what that felt like. But
And
I
let's
have
just
a
say welcome with joy. Whoever you
yes,
are, welcome with joy. And just,
absolutely. We're glad you're here.
we're so glad you're here.
So I,
Absolutely.
I just want to say something about what you just said, because one of my pet peeves, there are two phrases in the English language that I would like to totally get rid of. And the one you just brought up was give until it hurts. Right? Like you should
Yeah.
just give and give and give and give. And there's none of what I call the three must haves of a healthy adult relationship. And that is equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. If they're not there, like you say, incrementally, I receive something and I give it back a little richer, and then you give it back a little richer, and we get this fabulous thing going. These are important dynamics.
Yes, they are. Giving is an energetic balance between human beings, right? It's an energy. Love is an energy flow. And if it's out of balance, we get drained. And the thing is then we become resentful, right? Now the real one of the things happens if you grew up in a place where it wasn't right to reach out, and that reaching out at home, one of my clients had the greatest analogy. She said she wants to reach out for her needs with her but then energy that was her teenage children, her husband. But she goes, it's like she had a dog collar, an electronic dog collar. They had a dog and they put out the electronic sensors, and when the dog gets too close to the sensors, an uncomfortable feeling goes off. She goes, every time I start to reach out for my needs, the dog collar inside my head goes off and I get an uncomfortable feeling and I pull back. And I have seen when, if you go into a relationship with someone who's not a hijackal, then a lot of times these people won't receive. I can still remember the husband says, "What do you do when your wife thinks she has no needs?" So it's important to know it's not only to give, but but giving that other person a right to give back allows them to feel good about themselves too. Love wants to give, so it's important to receive. And just notice if there's a problem, if you give too much, can you truly receive as well? It's okay to receive. It's okay to take in. Uh, you know, that's the biggest thing. I'll be a taker. Of course you will be. You're supposed to be. We're supposed to take in and give. That's almost a toxic thing for people without this rights. And they get real resentful, but who wants to be the king or queen of resentment? That's not a good energy to give.
No. And going back to this energetic balance in relationship, it so needs to be well calibrated, because sometimes we become over givers, leaning in, hoping something will come back. Well, if I just love a little more, if I just do a little more of what they want, if I don't talk, if I don't nag, if I'm more patient, if I just wait, and you start
Yes.
diminishing and diminishing and diminishing yourself as you overgive. And overgivers are undertakers, and that's a death. An
Yes.
emotional death sentence, right?
Oh, that's a great line. Overgivers are undertakers, all puns intended. you know,
Yeah.
and it's important to decide. Everybody has their own little signature, what they need. Okay, what the energy needs to feel like I have one car that wants diesel, another one wants gasoline. We wouldn't want to mix them up. They'll both run fine, but they need what they need. It's important. Sometimes when I work with my clients, I get them real clear on what am I willing to give, what am I willing to give, and what am I willing to not give, what am I willing to take, what am I not willing to take. Like, I'm willing to give support, I'm not willing to give mama. I'm willing to take feedback. What I'm not willing to take is soul withering criticism. I'm willing to give, you know, partnership. I'm not willing to be sugar daddy. I'm just running through things that people have said. I'm willing to be a beautiful sexual partner. I'm not willing to be a Barbie doll. These now just get close. Now there's giving, but it needs, and whatever that key is for you, every client says it differently. You figure out what FM station you need to receive on and give on, is what I'm saying. And that, because it's a generic right that all of us have to give and to receive. But everybody has a few things. Some of us need more physical touch than others. Some of us need, like Gary Chapman said, more words of significance. Some people need more certainty. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, get figure out what your system needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really important thing, this energetic balance, and to believe that you deserve to have energetic balance. Because if you've become kind of a heat seeking missile for people pleasing, like, I will do anything if you'll pat me on the head, and I know that's a gross exaggeration, but if you get to that place, you want to come back to center and say,
Yeah.
I remember when my mother died. She was the second. I nursed both my parents to their death at home. My father died 5 years earlier, and my mother died. And afterwards, I was sitting on my yoga room floor. I owned a yoga and health retreat at the time where I had my practice, and I had a bunch of photographs out, and I was making albums for my kids and things from their photos and mine. And so I'm sitting down there and I'm thinking, I'm going to go and look at the photos, because my
Mhm.
mother always told me I was fat and ugly. I'm going to go and look at the photos and find evidence of fat and ugly. Now, I may be delusional, Gary. There is that option, but I didn't find any.
Great.
And so I was sitting there in the twilight. I remember it so well. I was sitting against the wall on the floor thinking, what is the message here? What is the message? And 3 days before my mother died, I put my hand on my mother's because God knows she would not have ever held mine. So I put my hand over my mother's hand and I said, you know, Mom, you never told me that you love me. And she looked at me and she looked down her nose and she said, I know.
Oh, wow.
So I had these fresh memories. So I'm sitting there on my yoga room floor. It's twilight. It's getting dark. I've had this experience with the photos and I'm deeply thinking, like, what is this about? And then I realized that there was this little part of me, and maybe if you're listening, you'll resonate with this. There was this little part of me that, much as I did not like my mother on every level, there was a little part of me was waiting for the approval of someone of whom I didn't approve.
Hmm.
And that light filled that twilight room in an instant. Like, here there was this part of it. I didn't like a thing about her. If she was going to approve, that meant that it was in her value system, not mine. Why would I want her approval? I did not. And
Yeah.
one of the ways that I could free myself was to realize that. And I think it's important here when we're talking about being welcome from with joy and then having the right to have our needs met, to realize that our needs are our needs. I don't need somebody's approval to tell me it's okay for me to want or need something.
No, you don't. You have, the right to see when you're dealing with a hijackal and you're thinking, how do I please him? How do I get love? The thing is, what I call a right to create your own experience is somebody, when you lose it, when somebody else gets to be the standard of your experience. Oh my God, what do I do to have to get their love? And we work and work and work. I remember thinking in high school, my God, I'm a straight A student. What in the world is it going to take to get this woman to say the words I love you? She said it 1, 7, and 5. Heard it twice. And the day came when I realized that there was a part of her that was so wounded and mentally ill that the only thing that the sane part of my mother that was left could do was to reject me, lest she hurt me even worse.
Now,
When
that's
I
a kind
realized,
interpretation.
yeah, when I realized that what was left of my mother's sanity was pushing me away, I realized, okay, there's love there. It's rather badly formed, as we once talked about. It's rather deformed and sad. But and she didn't, and I look back at her past and given what she went through, the abuse, she was never given it. And parents give what they were given. And it's too bad that she never got it elsewhere. I know that for me, I just had some good friends. I had some good teachers. I had a sixth grade teacher that went all the way to the school board when he was not given me as his teacher. I had been done science from third grade on. I did science projects with him. And he was waiting to be my sixth grade teacher, and they gave me to Mr. Allison, and he was livid. And Mr. Allison said, "No, I got him." But I didn't realize, until he went to the school board to say, I'm the most logical one to teach this kid. Right. And he came back in with a letter from the school board. I got to tell you, that meant something to me.
Oh, I'm sure it
That's,
did.
you know,
Yeah.
sometimes, and yeah, a part of me would delete it. Oh, I'm just a nerd. Well, no, I wasn't a Mr. Leland, and you've got to. And so if you think back, where, if you're listening, did you maybe get it, but some part didn't know how to take it in?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's as much love as a public school teacher can give a sixth grader. you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. And I just put SaveYourSanityPodcast.com up there for you because Gary and I did an episode recently on well formed and badly formed love. So, what he was just talking about, you'll find it there and it's worth going and having a look.
yes,
So, it's important the things that we're talking about. And I'm glad that you're very welcome for whatever you're saying. Thank you for,
you're
um, and I'm glad that you had that realization. That's good. But there are many many rights that Gary talks about in his book. There are rights that we talk about on the podcast and things. And we talk also about attachment styles. And this has been a wonderful time together, Gary. But I think we want people to come and visit us and perhaps have a session with us if they have questions.
Yeah.
You can have a session with Gary. You can go to his website at GarySalyer.com and learn more about his work there. And you can find me at forrelationshiphelp.com. It's really important to be able to recognize your power in being able to overcome, shift, change, and evolve. And when you recognize that, hey, I can do that, I have the power to do that, I may have to seek some support for that or seek someone who can ask me the right questions or walk beside me as I do it, but I'm worth it, right, Gary?
You are worth it. And a lot of times, if the best deal available is to separate, you have a right for support too. I call that the right to separate and belong. If you're trying to do it all by yourself, those resources allow someone to be able to, to give you these resources because you're kind of blind to these feelings that you could have. So you have a right to feel support, to be part of a supportive we. And when you reach out, allow yourself to get the support you need because you deserve it. You have a right to be a we, and you deserve to feel empowered. The biggest thing I'm saying in the book is you have a right to feel welcomed and worthy and cherished and protected and empowered with choice in every relationship. And it's okay to reach out for the help so you can choose and pick and create and maintain every relationship so those feelings are yours. Because when you feel welcomed and worthy, cherished and empowered, you feel loved. Just think about any of those feelings, any relationship, anyone's missing, you don't feel so loved. Reach out for the support you need. You deserve it, and it will empower you.
Yes, and Gary's talking about his book, Safe to Love Again. Go find it at GarySalyer.com. Go find it at Amazon, wherever you like to buy your books. A great book. I've read it, loved it. Read it more than once, actually. Went back and read all the notes that I wrote in it.
That's
So,
great.
really important. If you want my book, it's Kaizen for Couples, Smart Steps to Save, Sustain, and Strengthen Your Relationship. You can find that on Amazon, of course, and at For Relationship Help. Thanks so much for being with me tonight, Gary.
Well, thank you, Rhoberta. You're a good friend, and I love being in your presence. You're such a wonderful and dear soul, and I love the work you're doing, and you're bringing light. And thank God you're on the planet.
Well, I feel the same way about you, and I think together we can bring more and more things to people. And we'll continue to do these broadcasts, so join us and ask your questions or bring your questions. Make sure to subscribe, whichever page you're on tonight. If you're on my page at facebook.com/relationshiphelpdoctor, or you're on my YouTube channel for Relationship Help, or you're in my Facebook group, Optimize Life After Emotional Abuse. Put your comments in, any questions, any things you wish you'd ask, we'll answer them for you. And in the meantime, take very good care. Come on over to forrelationshiphelp.com, listen to Save Your Sanity podcast, and join me on YouTube at For Relationship Help.